Let me just make sure. Can you hear me? Let's see. Let me make sure. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Thank you. Peace and grand rising to the sovereign, original, indigenous, natural, divine heirs. Today is Cinco de Mayo, May the 5th, and we want to take just a moment to honor our Olmec brothers and sisters and wish them a healthy, prosperous day today. And we changed the meaning of everything back to what it should be. It is a celebration. It's not anything other than a celebration of the grand rising of our Olmec brothers and sisters who were previously misidentified as Mexicans. They are actually Moors. So this month, May, is a huge month in the cosmos. And of course, again, it's celebrating our grand rising. So there are a couple of, well, every day this month is worth celebrating, but we have a couple of days that we want to mention with regard to your writs and affidavits and your court actions and things like that. Your sovereign demonstrations, there are certain days that you can plan to do those sovereign demonstrations whereby the energies are higher on those days and the frequencies are higher in our favor. So in planning your court actions and sovereign demonstrations this month, there are some important events happening in the cosmos that will provide energetic momentum, velocity, height, and trajectory to your actions, to your writs, your affidavits, and the spiritual rising. Let's see. Consider doing targeted affidavits starting on May 9th. Venus and Mercury will appear once again in the evening sky, which to me, that is one of the highlights. I absolutely love seeing Venus in the sky. Just one moment. Let me do just a couple of things here. Okay. I always look forward to Venus being in the sky because it appears right outside my window when I'm sleeping. And so consider doing targeted demonstrations on the 9th specifically. This Venus and Mercury appearing in the sky together in the west will continue for quite some time. It usually lasts about 6 or 7 months, actually. On May 17th, Mercury will reach its greatest eastern elongation and will be its furthest from the sun at that time, which turns out to be 22 degrees from the sun, and the 22nd degree in our Masonic, and when I say our Masonic, I'm talking ancient, before all of that corporate Masonic crap. We all have the Masonic intellect because it's in our blood. 22 is a great number, so you may start noticing 22 showing up everywhere around the 17th of May. Sometimes there will be things going on in the cosmos where we see 1111 or 1. Whenever you start seeing numbers repeating like that, then know that something is going on in the cosmos that's aligning with you and with us as a whole and sui generis. As the month progresses, Mercury and Venus will come closer and closer together each night. So this whole month is going to be great for communication, unification, and also to get out in nature, barefoot, and ground. This will increase the peace and intensify the quiet power, Islam justice almost, intensify the quiet power and authority with which we demonstrate and speak. So if you've ever seen someone who's quiet, but whenever they speak just a little bit, they don't even have to talk loud. Everyone's listening and people start moving and doing and making sure that things are done according to what's been said. Our national and universal quiet authority and power is front and center this month. Starting this month and into perpetuity. When we speak, it's, that whole E.F. Hutton piece. That's the original E.F. Hutton was one of us. And when E.F. Hutton speaks, everyone listens. You know how the hybrids were hypothecated that. Well, it's like that with our nation and with all the things that each one of us is doing together. So getting out, take off your shoes, and let your feet touch the grass and the dirt and the beach and the earth, so that the intensity of the energies and the frequencies that are coming from us out to the cosmos can come back to us again and make us more one if that's possible. Make us, it just aligns us, aligns our chakras and puts us in the right alignment with everything around us, so that again, when we speak, manifestations happen more quickly. On May 15th, 16th, and 17th, which coincides with Shabbat day, Shabbat time is an ancient time. It'll be a great time to demonstrate. Shabbat means the giving of the law. That is what that time is specifically marked for in our ancient history. May 15th, 16th, and 17th, great time to do demonstrations, court actions, sending out writs and liens, etc. Going and physically getting up and doing the demonstrations, 15th, 16th, and 17th, great time to do it, especially now. For those wanting to add even more electricity and high frequency to your demonstrations on the 15th, 16th, and 17th, a 3-day fast would assist you with that. So a 3-day fast, it can be a water-only fast. It can be water and juice. It can be a fast from meat, or it can be a fast from all things that's, whatever your demonstration is, you can fast and put that demonstration in the forefront of your ancestral energy for greater effectiveness. And not to say that if you don't fast, your demonstrations will be less effective. They will be just as effective. However, fasting creates the space for the frequencies to fill. In other words, if your body doesn't have a whole bunch of food that is, fighting to digest and weighing you down, and then you're drinking lots and lots and lots of water, the energies and the electricity, that's basic science. The electrical energies, the downloads, the ancestral downloads that are coming and hitting this earth like solar flares repeatedly every day, all day, and every night, you'll get those, and they'll be a lot clearer. There's a lot more clarity in fasting, water fast, specifically lots of water, simply because the food that we've been eating while we were asleep was designed to weigh us down and make it so that we couldn't hear. But, you know, as we continue the grand rising, integrating water fast into what we do is going to be key. It's going to be key, even if it's just a one-day water fast, or from sun up to sundown, those 3 days, water only. However you choose to do it is up to you and whatever the ancestral energies tell you. On May 28th, Venus and Mercury will come very close together, and there will be a conjunction of Venus and Mercury, just like the one with Jupiter, Saturn, and the Moon. We had like 3 of those between December and January. 3 of those, which is unprecedented. It's amazing. They stayed conjunct for a lot longer this year, this year. Because for us, this year didn't change over until March. Very similar to the one that of Saturn, Jupiter, and the Moon and Mars. There was a triple conjunction as well. What does this mean for us? Venus, and this is what we're going to discuss today, Venus is about governing money. Venus is about governing money. Venus is about governing values and all things that are high quality. So when you talk about money, we get a whole different vibe about money than we had when we were asleep. It's something totally different. It's a means by which it's a resource for us to continue the grand rising. That's what money is all about for us, is we continue to rise. It's also about the manifestation of earthly 3D pleasures and property. And this is right in alignment with what we've been talking about on our calls. Mercury is about travel, it's about commerce, and it's about messengers and messages. So around the 28th, and we've been getting them all along, all of us have, but around the 28th specifically, there's going to be some individual messages given to each one of us. If we just listen to the ancestral energies, they're going to give us something specific just for us. And I don't know what that is. You know, for each one of us, it's going to be a different message based on where we are, what we're doing, where we're going, what we're focused on, and all of that. So, and it's going to be a great message. It's going to be a gift message, something that will give us clarity and direction in something that we've all been seeking. So somewhere around the 28th when this conjunction happens. That's what conjunctions are for, is to bring things together. Speaking of Venus and Mercury being money, commerce, travel, etc., we're going to talk today about banking again, because this is where the most confusion has been placed on our land with regard to the courses and the corporate. They caused more confusion, and we allowed it because we got that whole fiat mindset into our minds, and we started chasing fiat. And that's all it is, really, when we're asleep, is a chase. You never catch it, you just chase it. And when I say you never catch it, it's debt. It's supposed to run from us. Debt is supposed to run from the heirs. Period. And it does, and it is. So, speaking of banking, is there anyone on the call who is familiar with a banking process called double entry double entry bookkeeping. And you can star 6 if you're familiar with double entry bookkeeping. Okay, so double entry bookkeeping is a process that the hybrids have been using in, go ahead, Nobility.
Yes, Justice, I am. Yezeriel Perez-Bay.
Yes.
Yeah, I took 2 years of accounting in the high school that I went to, and that's what I learned there, double entry accounting.
So thank you, Nobility. So with double, and that's what we're going to talk about. That is a process that the hybrids use in order to hypothecate our sovereign status and to get everything that they've ever gotten. Okay? And double entry booking is one side called supposed assets and the other side supposed liabilities. Okay? Now, it just really blew my mind, and I don't know if that's the right term, but the ancestors know what I mean when I say it blew my mind, when I realized what was really happening with double entry booking. See, in our sovereign bank, we don't need to do double entry booking. We don't need to do it. We only have one side. Yes. Let me, so, I'm not sure, Justice Olongo. It might be because of computer and, I'm not sure why there are 2 showing on the board. But if you want, I can remove one of them. But, sorry about that, Justice Olongo. I don't know why it's doing that. But with double entry booking, they have an asset side and a liability side. So, I forgot to do all rise and stand. This is a sovereign, living, ancient, Article 3, Moorish, American, Moroccan, consular court action. I am sovereign, living justice, Pauline Denise Ritchie, in capitis dimiutio nolo, in red ink, in propria persona juris, in proprio solo, and in proprio heredes. So I took this slide from one of the banking videos that I watched recently, and I'll put the link to that video in the chat here. In fact, let me go ahead and put that link in here now so that you all can see it. Yes, Empress Portia said double crossing bookkeeping. Yes, it sure was. Wait till you hear what that's all about. Let me put this link in the chat, and then we'll go into that. Okay, the link to the video where these slides came from. The title of the video is Richard Scylla, The Art of Banking Since the Medici. And that's where these slides came from. When I realized what they were doing, it really showed me how valuable we really are. So we've been talking about capital and capital letters, right? We've been talking about that and how we don't use capital letters because that's debt. Well, in order for them to start a bank, okay, they had to find some heirs that would consent to being capitalized. That's how, whenever they talk about raising capital, we need to raise capital so that we can do this and that. We need to build this. We need to do that. We need to raise some capital. So what do they do when they're raising capital? Some of the ways that they raised capital was they would invite all the CEOs of all the corporations to a nice big fancy dinner and solicit quote unquote donations from them. Investors, that's what they were looking for, investors, people doing business as investors. So they would invite all of these CEOs and everything, and we thought that when they did that they were inviting the CEOs and stuff because the CEOs made a lot of fiat. That's what we thought. But that's not what they were doing. That is not what they were doing. Whenever they would invite the CEOs to this big investors dinner, the CEOs would just bring their books from their corporation and see which sleeping heirs they had on the books that they could share the information with. So the light company, the CEO of the light corporation rather, you know, the ones doing business as utilities, which is just fraud, pure fraud. The CEO of, let's say, the utility company would be invited, and he would bring his books, and they would look and see how many heirs they had on, sleeping heirs they had on the books. And then the light company would share the sleeping heirs who thought that they were capital and who thought that they would accept a bill in black ink and capital letters. Yes, Justice Yezreel said it. That's why they call it so-called funding capitalization. Yes. All they were doing was sharing information where we consented to capital letters in black ink. And guess what they would do? Invite these CEOs and all of these people, and they would just sit down and eat and make an agreement to share the information. And then what would they do? The light company and the light corporation rather, and all of these other corporations and all these other banks, quote unquote, would send us, and they wasn't sending it to us, they were sending it to the all caps, all black, and say, we're doing information sharing. Do you consent to having your information shared with, you know, for credit purposes and et cetera? It really was for credit purposes. For them, not us. So they would share the all black, all caps name with each other, and they did that. They did that repeatedly. And so that's why when we would go to the GMEI utility website and see all of this stuff out there, we're wondering, how did they even get, where did they even get the information? It was all of their capital. Every single corporation that called themselves raising capital were just sharing our information. And it was not our information, it's black information. So we're not black. But as long as we consented to be that, without full disclosure, by the way, then they would just do it. And see, they would have the capital fundraiser, quote unquote, before the bank opened. And they would say, hey, you know, we plan on opening the bank and, you know, all of that. Well, even when they call it an initial public offering, when they're getting ready to put it on the stock market, that means that they've already gotten some heirs to agree to be something in black ink, and it didn't take many heirs. In fact, it took very few because it's not that many of us in comparison to, to the, well, and I can't even say that because that's not even true anymore. That it's not as many of us as we would think. But in looking at this chart that's up here, this double bookkeeping ledger of let's just call it Bank One. Look at the capital. That's the thing. That's where they have exactly 200 heirs. 200 heirs that have agreed to the all black, all cap name. Now, mind you, you're not getting anything for this, for consenting to that mess, except some debt. And they're going to charge fees, and they're going to do this and that, as long as we think that black thing is us. And very, very, very few times would they give out a loan. Very few times would they do that, because you can't give out a loan to a sovereign. You can't keep doing that because we're the source of it. So they would, and they didn't really need us to have it. They needed the hybrids to have it. So the hybrids can do all the stuff they were doing. The colonization and all of that. So when you look at this chart and you look at the capital, they started with 200 heirs. And see, they're calling it a liability, but I'll tell you why they're calling it a liability. See, the 200 heirs that were asleep and thinking that they were some name in capital letters created the cash reserve. So whenever they had enough heirs to stay asleep and use the black name, they would create out of thin air 100 cash reserves, 100 units of cash reserves. Let me put it that way, 100 units. And one unit could be 10 million fiat Federal Reserve debt notes, if that's what they said. So for each heir, they would say, okay, we have 200 sleeping heirs who don't know they're not black. We can create 10 million for each one of them. 10 million, one unit equals 10 million Federal Reserve debt notes because we have some heirs. So we'll keep that as the cash reserve. And then where did the deposits come from? The deposits is 800 hybrids, foreign hybrids. And the hybrids would come, and it's not that they were putting a bunch of fiat in there. Some were, but very few. They were looking to see what they could get out of it. So what would they do? Tap the cash reserve. The hybrids would then come and get the cash reserves out. But the heirs wasn't getting much, if anything, except they were going to pass some more debt to you because you think you're black, or you were thinking you were black. We're all included in that. We thought we were that, but we're not. We're the heirs. We're the reason the bank exists, because we consented to being black. So the capital is the thing that they raised. Now, the reason they call it a liability is because at any given time, any of us could say, well, I just got charged $300 in fees. I'm not, and this is what we thought it was. We thought it was $300. It was really debt. Then we would say, okay, well, we're not going to bank there anymore. And with capital being only 200, if you have 50 that leave, then look how much you've lost in cash reserves if 1 unit of cash reserves is 10 million. And 50 heirs leave, that's 500 million that you've lost just by the heirs, 50 heirs leaving. 500 million. Because 50 heirs said, I don't want to be capital for that anymore. But see, we didn't know that's what we were saying. And then after a while, they started just keeping, because we were not awake and we didn't know. Even if we didn't bank there anymore, they would always leave some debt there and just keep using the capital, the cash reserves. Just keep using it. We're thinking that we have gone on about our business and we don't bank there anymore. That's what we were thinking. And they still got your name, you know, that black name, which is not ours, that black name on the roll, and they still got their 10 million and in some cases 100 million, depending. And then the 800 hybrid foreigners would come and just pull from what you put in there. Oh, we need a $2 million loan for our domicile, for our house rather. That's what they would call it, a house. We need $2 million for our house, and we need $5 million for this and $4 million for that. You know, and $500,000 for this, and I need a new conveyance, and it's $150,000. And, you know, they were just shuffling units around because we consented to be the capital. And now look at this, because see, they call it double entry booking because both sides have to equal 1,000. You see where the totals are here? Both sides have to equal 1,000. They have to stay at 1,000 no matter what this mix of numbers is. If you have, and 1,000 is just, you know, that's a number that's what the Federal Reserve would be setting. When they talk about, you know, the Federal Reserve having to do with anything. And the thing is, with these, with loans and stuff, they didn't want to give us anything. We were not, listen, the only reason they needed us there was to say, please consent to being capital. We're not going to give you any of the benefits of this bank, so forget it. We're going to give the benefits to the foreign hybrids and let them go out and do stuff. All we need you for is to sign this contract, and we're going to pass you some debt. You know, we don't really have much for you. We're not going to give you anything but debt, actually. And for those that are looking at one domicile and one conveyance, think about how much you brought to the table. That's a bowl of porridge. That's a bowl. Empress in the chat said, you like toilet paper? We agreed to be the toilet paper, and people still don't want to get that capitalism out of here. They still fighting it because they don't understand it. Black ink and capital letters did that, and we agreed to it. And they still don't want to get that. Still don't. That was our issue. We might as well go look in the mirror and say, you did that, you consented to that now. Now what you going to do about it? Well, we started our own bank, haven't we? Yes, we have. We got our own thing going on here. Now you see why it's so important for us to keep doing what we're doing with the Moroccan American Exchange and the companies and all of that, because we're doing the same thing. Except each one of us brings an unlimited amount of resources to the table. And this time we're not the capital. We're the real source of the resources. See, capital is a resource. We're the source. Period. And all it took was just a couple of heirs, just a few. Look at those numbers. And I believe that those numbers are a little bit high because hybrids are doing that. But the hybrids in the video that I put in the chat, where these slides came from, I could tell, you know, they didn't even need 100 or 200 heirs. They only needed 3 or 5. And they had 300 million right off the bat out of thin air. Thin air. And whenever one of the capital, the ones agreeing to be capital, which was, you know, we all thought we were capital at one point in our fleet, the ones agreeing to be capital, if they lose 2 or 3, or if they're friends with the quote unquote Federal Reserve in capital letters, which is, you know, the fake, then the Federal Reserve held the bank of capital letters, sleeping heirs. Every sleeping heir who agreed to be capital, that's why the Federal Reserve is directly connected to the fake birth certificate and the fake social. They are holding all of that in order to pass it out to the banks if the banks, you know, if we say what we've been saying. You've been hearing about the Federal Reserve printing a whole lot of money, printing, and they weren't printing money, they were printing fiat. Why did they do that? Because the capital is not capital anymore. We said we're not that. We're not that. We're starting our own. And we're not starting it. We're just activating what was always there. Our ancestors put it in place. It's a wrap already. If there was only 5 of us that returned an Moroccan American packet, that's enough right there. That's enough to finance everything. But we have more than that. Way more than that. And way more than that is relative. I'll put it that way because we want to be truthful. We want to stay truthful. We're going to stay truthful, period. Because some people think way more would be 5,000 or 6,000. We don't have that many. So we have more. So enough to affect the whole outcome of how we use our resources. So they couldn't start anything until they had until they were holding a few contracts by sleeping heirs. Every corporation started that way, every last one of them. And that is why when we woke up, the first thing we did was start leaning. Saying, nope, we're not that, we're not that, we're not that, you're the capital, we're not that. We're the sovereign, and that's why our liens have us noted as the sovereign in red in all lowercase letters instead of black ink in capital letters. But the ancestors still, anyway. That's what happened with all of this banking stuff. Yes, Justice Yazarel. Con means against. It was against the heirs. We were against ourselves because we consented to that. So we can't even be mad at them. We can't be mad at hybrids when we were just signing away in black ink, just signing. Then, after a while, the banks got smart and start making you do things with your right thumbprint, but putting it in black. in black, saying we know this is a real heir. That's what the banks were doing. We know this is a real heir because we know who the heirs are. We know their thumbprint. That's their seal. We've known that since they were born. Is it a real heir? Yes. Are they really black? Look, they think they are. Because we got a black thumbprint that they did by consent. And of course we didn't know, or we would have never done that. So when you look at this right here, this here, the double booking comes in where they're calling the capital a liability, but the cash reserves that's created by the capital as an asset. Because that's really all they wanted, was to be able to create out of thin air some fiat. And they're saying that the heirs are the liability. Why? Because if the heirs wake up, the bank loses. If the heirs wake up, it's dangerous to do that. It's a liability. We could lose. And guess what happened? Oh, we'll just pretend that it's COVID-19. That's causing all the havoc. No, we're not going to pretend that. We know what it is. We're awake. So all of the assets and the real worth now knows we're the real worth. And then cash reserves that they created it when we agreed to be black ink and capital letters. The cash reserves is considered the net worth of the bank. So whenever J.P. Morgan Chase or, these banking corporations, former banking corporations, because, they're done now. But whenever they would say, J.P. Morgan is worth, $2.8 billion, quote unquote, and dollars was in capital letters because they know it's dead, is worth $2.8 billion just this quarter alone. It's because they had heirs on the books. And that would go up and down based on how many of the hybrids came through and pulled from the cash reserves, and what did the hybrids do with the cash reserves. They would take them out and start another corporation. So Becky and Bob would come to the bank and say, hey, you got some heirs there? Yeah, I see you got some capital. Well, we need $4 million. And we'll go out and we'll open up a grocery store. We'll open up a shoe shop, a Nike shoe shop. Then we'll get some more heirs to sign on. They don't know that, they don't know that they're not supposed to contract with us. So we'll open up a shoe store because we know they like shoes. And we'll make the shoes really pricey so that every time they slide that card and sign that piece of paper, we got some more capital. And then we'll share our capital with you. So they were doing that so that they did not have to, yes, Justice, yes, Jarrell. Oops, then the heirs woke up, yes. But see, they were sharing that information back and forth, and we busy shopping, blind, just sleep. They're sharing the information back and forth, and then when they couldn't share the information anymore and it looked like they weren't getting any new heirs to be asleep and consent to capitalism, if the banks felt like they were in trouble, they would go to the Federal Reserve and say, hey, we've saturated this area. We need some more heirs that consent to capitalism. Do you have any of their socials and information of the ones that consent to that? And the Federal Reserve would give them that. See, that's all that was. When banks, quote unquote, go to the window of the Federal Reserve and get more capital, all they was doing was getting names and numbers. Names and numbers, and we don't have names, and we don't have Social Security numbers. But they would go to the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve would give them. They would look and see, okay, we got some heirs over here. They terminated corporate contracts with us, but we can't hypothecate them. So let's look and see if there's any other heirs who consented to be black. Let's look and see if we have any active contracts in the system. And then I'll give you their information. Oh, really? Well, the banks haven't been helping them, so they haven't signed anything recently with the bank. So let's just check the jails and the prisons and see if any of them signed any bonds. Then we'll give you their information for you to hypothecate. And if they signed any bonds, we'll hold them to all the debt that was ever out there. And not only will we hold them to all the debt, but we'll yank them on back up in a couple of months and get a few more signatures from them. If they sign. We'll pass them as much debt as we got. This is the Federal Reserve and the fake banks saying that stuff. The fake Federal Reserve. Sitting up, yes, just sitting up, just their only job was to find some sleeping heirs and get a signature in black. That was their only thing. So then in 2018, when we woke up and said, wait a minute, everybody on this earth, y'all better terminate all corporate contracts with that United States corporation company. Terminate all of them. We told them to do that in 2018, and that's out there on the public record. And they did it quickly. It didn't even take them, they were ready to terminate the corporate contracts in the first place. Because they don't like debt either. And shortly after we said that, and I won't even say her name, but the one that was doing business at the head of the IMF was saying that, the contracts have ended, they've come to an end, but those nations don't need to try and do everything by themselves. They need us. They want to stay in join with us. And that joinder right there with the dead is what they do in the fake courts. And that's why we don't go to their fake courts. When they say all rise, and then the fake judge walks in and says, okay, be seated. That means they've gotten joiners. That means the heirs are joining with the dead when they go in there like that. That's why we don't go. We just do our own court action. And if we're forced, supposedly forced, because it's all by consent, if we don't terminate all corporate contracts, they're going to collect them, and the heirs will be surety. Because we refuse, that would have been the case, but that's not the case anymore because we don't have any contracts with them. But that's what was happening previously. That's why a termination of all corporate contracts is a part of the document for the Moroccan American exchange. Because you can't be sovereign and a citizen at the same time. There's no such madness that exists. No such madness. So the documents that come with the Moroccan American exchange it clears the path so that we can do all of the merchant and commerce ministry that we need to do in order to elevate us all up. See, the purpose of the Moroccan American exchange, and this is not a sales pitch, this is the truth, is getting all of us to go back to the things that helped us rise. The natural food, the natural materials, the natural cloth, everything, all of the natural things that we need in order to continue the grand rising. That's what the Moroccan American exchange is for. It's to bring all of that in and get it going on a massive scale. Because we need all of that. Gold raises vibration. It raises frequency because it conducts electricity best. That's why they use it in electronics, because it's the best conductor of electricity. So what do? We become, we put it in red in all lowercase letters, all of the gold mines. And it's not just, again, it's not for us to be flashing around. It's to raise our vibration so that we get where we're going. It's a means to a goal. It's not the goal. Gold and silver is not our GOAL. It's not the ultimate goal. It is a means by which we achieve the goal. We need gold spoons and forks and utensils and etc. Because even whatever it is that we put in our mouth needs to be raising our vibration and assisting with that. We need all of that. Our ancestors knew that. They knew it. So when banks are talking about commodities, that's what they're talking about. Now, for us, we don't need to do double entry booking. We only have assets. We have no liability. But they had to do it, just like it's showing here on the screen. They had to do that because they have to count their liability, not ours, because we don't have any. So then this bank right here, keeping both sides at 1,000, keeping the assets and the liabilities at 1,000. When you talk about investments, it's just like what I was saying initially. When they call their quote-unquote investors together, the investors just pass them black names and black contracts. They just pick active contracts. That's all. They pick active contracts. The most recent active contract that they can find in the system, they pick it. And that's where we have signed something in black saying that we are a name in all capital letters or even one capital letter. And black ink. And that's why capital and investments is the same. those numbers are the same. Because the fake investors brought that, the names, and we don't have names, they brought the names and invested. Invested just means that the heirs have put their full faith and credit in a fake dead system. So they keep signing in black and accepting the debt. Our ignorance was the investment. I'll say that again. Our ignorance was the investment. But we're not ignorant anymore. So if you look here, it says return on capital is 32 of 200. And again, capital is they have 200 heirs, and most of them didn't have that many. Return on capital, 32 over 200 or 16%. And that's coming from the 2% on the deposit, the 6% on the investments, and the 8% on the loans. You just put those percentages together and you got 16%. That means the hybrids brought in a little something so that they could get a bigger something out of it. And not only did they get a bigger something out of it, but they got loans and all of that stuff out of it too. Meanwhile, the heirs get nothing but some fees. The different banking structure for the heirs. Whether we're asleep or awake, it's still going to be different. Just a second. It's still going to be different. So now let's take a look at if these numbers change just a little bit. See here, they were getting return on their capital. All the return on capital is you got 200 heirs. So do whatever you want with the rest of this stuff. Give out a few loans, take a few deposits, put it on the books, claim some investments. Just claim it. That's all they were doing. Add those percentages up, and then take that percentage, 0.16, and multiply it by 200. And that'll tell you what type of a return you got on those heirs. Now, in some places, and this is what the next screen is going to be about, in some places there weren't as many heirs. There were fewer heirs. And some banks didn't want to go to the Federal Reserve because the Federal Reserve used to charge them for that. That's why when you hear them talking about the Federal Reserve is saying interest rates are going to go up and down and up and down and whatever, well, if their interest rates are, if the bank is charging 2% and the Federal Reserve is charging 3%, then the Federal Reserve is getting everything from the bank, and the bank ain't making anything. No return on capital. And again, all of this is fighting back and forth over sleeping heirs. All of this is going back and forth over sleeping heirs. Banks didn't want to go to the Federal Reserve and get some names and socials because the Federal Reserve would charge them whatever in fiat. And they would just try their best to pass that on to the heirs. So it's, we didn't realize that all of that was all about us, but it is. Let me make sure, too, that I can unlock it just for just a moment to let that fell out. Yes. So let's look at this next one. So on this one, they got 16% return on capital. And they're saying on capital. That means that that is all about the heirs. Now, notice, before I go to the next screen, notice how they noted when they put capital up here in liabilities, it's got a capital C because they capitalized it. When they talk about a return on capital here down at the bottom, where it says return, the far right bottom of the screen, it says return on capital is 32 over 200 or 16%. They lowercase the word capital. That's not a mistake. They're now talking about the heirs unhypothecated, supposedly. Still black ink, so still not us. It's the contract. It's the contract that the heirs sign. Black ink and all lowercase letters is where the connection between the heirs thinking that we were something that we're not. So the contracts are the capital, that's where they get their return from. That's why the termination of corporate contracts is so powerful. It is the nexus. Yes, Justice Yezreel. It's the nexus. It's the turning point. If we don't sign their contracts, guess what? And then we terminate all contracts and keep terminating them. I hereby terminate all corporate contracts. Whenever we put that out there into the universe, and then put our own contracts in place, the universe is going to honor our agreements. And it's not contracts that we're doing. It's affidavits. We speak by affidavit. An affidavit is the difference between an affidavit and a contract for us is an affidavit is a command. It is the unquestionable, unequivocal, sovereign word of the heirs. They cannot get joinder, exactly, Justice Yezreel. They can't get joinder when we speak by affidavit. That's why they try not to put it in their records. There it is. There it is. Return on capital, which is return on the contract that the heirs signed in their sleep. Because that's the only way they get a benefit, is if we have contracts with them, which we do not. So then why is it that some banks seem to make more fiat than others on capital? Some raise more capital supposedly. Well, let's look at that. With double entry bookkeeping, where you have assets and liabilities. All they have to do in order to get a higher rate of return, this one doubled their rate of return by lowering the number of heirs that they have and increasing the number of depositors. The hybrid is the depositor. They're not capital because they don't bring any cash reserves or anything to the bank. They're just there to take out. The reason they're called depositors with a capital D, look at the word. What are they doing? Here's what they're doing. The heirs, when we sign the contract, we're yielding our sovereign status, supposedly. Okay, it's a delegation of authority. That's what it is. That's what those contracts are. They're delegations of authority. And a delegation of authority means we're saying we have no authority and they have all the authority when we sign contracts with them. So then when we do that, someone else is holding our sovereign authority, supposedly, or they're acting like they're holding our sovereign authority. And then what do? That's the bank holding the sovereign authority, quote unquote. So then when the hybrids come and deposit, they put $5 in, and the bank says, oh, you qualify for a $2.5 million loan to start a company, a corporation. Deposit. The root word is P-O-S-I-T, posit, which is like position. Have you ever seen the movie Trading Places? Okay, they're switching up places with the heirs when they do that. That's why they're in a separate category called deposit. That means do not position. So they're taking directly from the sleeping heirs who signed their contract. And then guess what happens when we terminate corporate contracts, especially when we do it thoroughly with banks included? Because see, when you terminate the corporate contracts, you can't just terminate some of them and leave some of them open and say, no, I'll keep these contracts, but these I'll terminate. You can't do that. It doesn't work. We terminate by court action all contracts. Yes, Justice Yezreel says it means no position. Correct. It means they never had a position and they needed to use ours. So what did they do? Raise the capital first. That means get the heirs to consent first. Then they can get all the benefits and all the loans and everything. That's why they were not going to give us no whole bunch of loans for us to go out and be wildly successful. That was not going to happen. Why? Because we're the source. We're the source. They're the ones who didn't have anything. We have everything. We are the all. Because we're not things, we're people. We're heirs. And people, P-E-E-P-E-L. Not person. So all they did was take, when they had enough names and social security numbers on their books of heirs who consented to the contract, then the hybrids would come and just be like, hey, yeah, Sue and Bob are doing great. They just opened a new corporation and they just bought a new house. Yes, Justice Malik, that's important what you just said in the chat. They raised us from the dead to switch places, kind of, sort of. They made us more dead. We consented to be dead when we signed the contract. And all they did was take our sovereign energy and use it to create all the stuff they created. So when you think about the one that was doing business is Bill Gates. Now think about his name. Bill Gates. Gates means government. And Bill means bill. Bill means debt in his case. And all he did was put Excel and Access programs, you know, the Microsoft Office programs, Excel and Access. All he did was make those programs be the basis for all banking and everything, and it automatically capitalizes everything. So when you put it in the system, it's going to automatically capitalize it because they have Excel and Access as their database background. So that's why they take and put the contracts in the computer. It's very easy. Yes, it is. It is. It will automatically capitalize it, and it's going to put it in black. So, oh boy. So our banking system is going to automatically puts everything in red and all lowercase letters. We got this. We got this. We got this. We already know what databases do. So we create our own. That means we're in complete control of it. Complete control. Now you see why we don't need to do double entry booking. Because we're not trying to hide some errors and keep them asleep. And every now and then throw one of them in a commercial with a smile on their face. Talking about, I bank at so-and-so bank. And they helped me get blah, 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 blah. No, 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 no. You help them exist. And they can't exist if you don't agree. And then when you create your own bank, Empress Portia, you better, ooh, come on now. This is the beauty of all of that, Empress. We've done that, except we're doing it analog. Empress Portia put in the chat, so now we need to create our own computer operating system. That is correct now. You are absolutely right about that. Many of us already know how to use DOS and C++ and C++, because see, they want to say that stuff is outdated. It's not outdated, it's the bare bones. We can program. We can write the programming for everything to be sovereign. And in fact, we have to write the program for it to be sovereign. I've done C++ and C++ and DOS program writing. It's not hard. It's not hard to do. Now, Justice Jezebel, I don't know. I've not heard of that one. What is the good thing about that one that you mentioned, Python?
Python is a language that that a lot of universities teach as a first programming course because it's so easy to learn. Python is actually written in C. And so it's a high-level programming language, so it's very much like English. So it tends to be easier for people to grasp. That would be the language that I would teach as a first language.
Really? Higher, you're done. Let's get it cracking. You know, but you see where we're going with all of this, right?
Yeah. Yes, we have to.
Yes, we have to. We do. And it's not going to be difficult because once we do it, see, our banking, we don't have to do all of that color where we do double entry booking just because we're trying to hide some errors and all of that. We don't have to do that.
No.
So it's going to be it's going to be a very simplified program.
You know, it's interesting that we're looking at this time. A couple of weeks back, I was looking at the way double entry bookkeeping is done, and I was thinking we're going to have to clean that up because in double entry they list cash as an asset, but they list it in the debit column. Debit means debt. Debit means debt. You can only have that if you're in a system where you're dealing with stuff that isn't money. Yeah. So it's like this is a bookkeeping system that's done on the negative side of the number line. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
We'll have to bring it to the right side of the number line.
Yes. Absolutely. That's what we've done it already, actually. Because remember, the banking starts with the agreement, or the for us the affidavit, for them the contract. So we've already put it on the right side.
Yes, yes.
Now we have to manifest that in all of our systems that we're setting up. See, I mean, how difficult is that going to be? Not very, because remember, the majority of what they have here, we don't have to even worry about it. We don't. And then, if you look up the word loan in the dictionary, an old dictionary, a loan is a gift from a sovereign. That's what a loan really is from ancient times, because we just used to give. We just used to give and give and give and give. So that Python, I'm going to have to look that up, just as usual, and we're going to have a chat about it, because we might as well. It's time anyway. If by the time we mention something, that means that it's about to manifest in the present, in this 3D. We have to manifest that. And in reality, it's kind of already started with the Moroccan American exchange. We've begun doing the face-to-face service meetings with the heirs who are completing the packet and setting everything up so that the system is in place and it's solid. And again, it's already solid. It's already in place. We just have to manifest that in this realm. So what you're talking about is next. Justice Malik just put a question in the chat. How can we exchange currency ourselves? Let me tell you where we are with that. All of the currency that was out there was fake fiat. Every bit of it. I don't care where it came from. How do I know that? Because we didn't produce it. It was produced by England, Fleet Street, or 55 Water Street in New York, or DC. That's where all the currencies came from, every last one of them. That's why we have to do what we're doing. So now with exchanging currencies, we won't be able to exchange gold-backed currencies until we give some out. We actually have to give it out to exchange it. All of the other indigenous nations of the earth cannot just arbitrarily create gold-backed currency without going through the primogenitors. That's why it's so important for us to wake up. Are they ready? Yes, they're ready. Are we ready? Yeah, we're ready, or we wouldn't be talking about it. But we have to back that. And that's going to happen first on this land mass, right here. So we have to, which we already do, we have Moorish sovereign dollarium, which is exchangeable for United States dollars in red and all lowercase letters, United States dollars, the real ones, the gold-backed ones, in all lowercase letters, in red, and not those fake fiat debt notes. There's no exchange there. So you can't exchange what we use, which is gold-backed sovereign credits and gold-backed money. You can't, those two can't go together. You can't exchange that for fiat. Fiat is not even a thing. Most people go months and years without even touching fiat, because everybody's swiping. Yes, Empress Portia, the tribe of Judah will be the grand. We are the grand rising already. It's already being done. All of that is already being done. So look here at this where the return on capital with a lowercase c, okay? They did it again, and these come directly from the video that I talked about earlier. So it's not a mistake that capital is all in all lowercase letters on here, and then capitalized when you talk about the bank. See, the heirs, we ourselves can never be a liability. It's the contract that's a liability, because at any time they knew we were going to wake up and terminate it. Any presumed contract. And it's a presumption simply because if we didn't know about it, if there was not full disclosure, then it's not valid. We didn't know that every contract that we supposedly signed using a capital letters and all of that, that they were depositioning us. We didn't know that we were depositioning ourselves. Yes, debt doesn't equal credit. It's apples and oranges. And it's actually like the difference between apples and a monkey. There's no even exchange there. No matter how you flip that, there's never going to be an even exchange with fiat and go back what we use. So then, remember we were talking about the bank accounts changing, and the bank account froze the day within 24 hours of me doing a court action on that black debt thing. The bank account, quote unquote, froze. And as that corporate covering was removed off of it, it slowly began to operate again, slowly, over weeks. Because for a while, there was only like a minimum of something that I could swipe for no matter what was in there. And it's been a while since, remember, when we talked about this last year, it was sometime in, well, not last year, because it was last year, in somewhere around September or October of last year. The bank accounts changed so that whenever I would swipe that card, it would show red in the account instead of black. And to this day, it's still like that. It's going to stay like that. In other words, it's not debt anymore, it's credit for us because we're the creditors. And even the system, once we did the liens and court actions on that system and stood that system up, it wasn't a dead system anymore, so it had to properly record what we do, because that was our intention. So the depositors were depositioning the heirs who consented to the contract. And that's why they prospered so, seemingly. Better domiciles, better cars, there's, you know, all of that, conveyances rather, and for them it's cars. Their children going to the best, whatever, private schools and all of that kind of stuff. All of that happened because we consented to a bank contract. And got absolutely nothing but more debt on top of debt in return. Every now and then they would give some of us a little bit more here and there. But it was like the sword of Damocles. I don't know if you know the story of the sword of Damocles. Whenever that type of a sword is present, or someone talks about the sword of Damocles, all that means is you can be sitting somewhere and there's a sword hanging up above your head on a very thin string. And at any time, it could come down on you. The sword of Damocles. Those contracts, at any time, we were consenting to be surety. But see, when we did the court action on that thing, then not even it was a month and 8 days later, the hybrid said, we're going to see if she will consent to be surety. So let's take her on in. And that was by my own consent too. And not just consent, it was by my own authority. Because I said I'm not abandoning my vast estate. So that was win number one for us. I'm not abandoning my vast estate. We're not abandoning this estate. That's a win. Because, she said she wasn't going to, abandon the estate. So, let's take her in and see if we can get some other kind of contract or see what happens. Let's see, does she really mean she's not dead and she's not going to be dead and she's not going to be surety? Yes, we meant that. And that means not eating the food, none of that stuff. Because don't you think it's weird that the hybrid will manhandle and roughhouse and take you in, and then all of a sudden they get real nice and say, do you want something to eat? Isn't that weird? That's bipolar. That means there's something going on with the food. Why is it that all of a sudden you're nice, but they practically broke my arm getting in here, And I'm just saying that Moors have felt that way. They pushing and carrying on to get you in there to get that signature, and then everybody get nice when it's time to eat. Because that's a contract too. The food is a contract. It had black ink and capital letters every time they brought it. That's why I said, no, I'm not eating that. Nope, not going to do it. Crazy. I love the way the ancestors have all of this set up, though. So, whenever they couldn't get a contract in the jail, that's pretty much a wrap, because then the Federal Reserve couldn't tap anything anymore. Because, see, every time, and this is why the quote-unquote prison industrial complex grew and grew and grew. It had to get bigger if we stopped buying all of that other stuff. Justice Onlongo put in the chat, sleeping Moors are asking me, would the Albions allow us to rise so easily without bloodshedding because they are lawless? They're not lawless. They're not lawless unless we think unless we're trying to take that corporate position. They get real crazy then because they know we're not supposed to be in that corporate court status. It's not a matter, they don't have a choice. It's not about what they allow, it's what we allow. If we stop signing those contracts, which we have, if we say we terminate all corporate contracts, the more of us that terminate the corporate contracts, they're not going to be, the hybrids are not, I'm telling you. When we get in our rightful place, they can't just do anything. And they won't. They won't. So they're not allowing anything. We're the ones doing all the allowing. We're the ones doing that. And then think about it. I think about those that I learned from, which is everyone. But there are some specific teachers that I learned from, and I'm thinking to myself, if they have not just confiscated the teacher and done away with the teacher, then the teacher's doing something right. Unless the teacher has a test like that coming up. Yes. I mean, they don't have any authority to allow anything. Again, their banks can't exist if we don't sign the contract. Period. So they're not allowing anything. We're the ones that are in control of everything from start to finish. Yes, Justice Jezreel, law governs all things. Well, who is the law? We are the law and we are the government. Let's get it, y'all. We are the law and we are the government. We govern all events. We do that. Going into a POW camp is a choice. I know some don't believe it. It's a choice. Get rid of the contract and then prove that you're not anything black. In capital letters, prove that you're not that. Regardless of what it takes, prove it. And see what happens. We govern everything. And prove it peacefully, without the war. Peacefully. Stand your ground. And for us, it's not even ground, it's land. Stand your land. Stand your ground is a hypothecation of stand your land. They don't have any land, so they say ground or soil. So what did the bank do with the double booking after they got the contracts from the prison system? That's why no matter what, we don't sign their documents, their paperwork. Jail cell, big deal. Not signing, not going to do it. So that you can pass that over to a bank so that a hybrid can get a $2 million house. Or a $500,000 conveyance, car, rather, for them. Nope. We're done with all of that. It's a wrap. Nunc pro tunc, actually. We're not being depositioned from our sovereign status. So with this double booking, how did they increase their return on capital? They lowered the number of heirs because they couldn't hardly find any in the Federal Reserve. They didn't want to pay the Federal Reserve fees in debt. The bank didn't. And this is the fake corporate bank. Didn't want to go to the Federal Reserve window so that they would have to pay. So guess what? They lowered the number of heirs that they had on their books because they couldn't find any. More heirs were terminating. That reduced their cash reserves. So what did they do? They started, this is where all of that quote unquote microloan and all of that comes into play. They increased the number of depositors, which is the foreign hybrid. But they were giving the foreign hybrid lower amounts of the cash reserves, which is debt still. for them in their bank. So then they got into the microloaning piece. All of those payday loan places and pawn shops and all of that. Yes, the pawn shops, the payday loan places. The places that offer their own little in-store, quote-unquote, in-house credit cards. Those are all the microloan places that were feeding up into the beast, which is the Federal Reserve. And the Federal Reserve was handing all of those contracts out to the banks to keep the fraud going. But the fraud started with a contract by an heir that was fraud. That's why we terminate all presumed corporate contracts, because that black ink in capital letters is fraud. It's fraud. Yes. Auction blocks. Yeah. Yep. So when they reduced the number of heirs because they couldn't find any that wanted to contract with them, it reduced the cash reserves. And the reason that they were able to get a higher return on capital is because here the what do you call these? The percentages stayed the same, but the number of deposits went up. Okay, the number of deposits went up, and when you have less heirs, but you give out more loans, yeah, they gave out more loans. See, in the first one, they only gave out 700 in loans. In this one, they gave out 850 in loans. Then you're making more in their debt system because you're creating more contracts. So you got the heirs, you got fewer heirs, but you're increasing the number of contracts that you got out there. And see, to them, the contract is the asset. It's an asset because it is the impetus for the cash reserve and everything else. Everything else is dependent on the contract. And then it's just a matter of how they manipulate those numbers. They increase the number of loans that they gave out to the hybrids. And what do the hybrids do? The hybrids, their job was to hypothecate and then start more businesses and do more things and create as many different ways as possible to get us to contract with them. That was their job. Create as many different ways for the heirs to contract with them as possible. So Bob and Sue and Becky and them would go down the street and open up a little shop, a store, something, anything. And then every time we go into their little store and swipe that card and sign that thing in black, because see, it matters even now. When I go to swipe, red pen and all of that, because I'm the creditor. Red pen in all lowercase letters, and I also write all the other stuff out too. The two things that I write the most, Pauline Denise Ritchie, in capitis dimiutio nolo, all sovereign rights exercised at all times. I will write that out. I don't care how tiny the little thing is, the little slip is, I will take the time to write that out. Well, you know what that means? That means that they cannot go and create a derivative from what I did. It's not their capital anymore. It is sovereign credit. Period. And that's why we're going through this transition. Once the transition is complete, they won't even be, and it's complete already because they're in subject status. So they can't turn around and say, oh, you signed this wrong. You must sign again. Do a different sign. They can't tell you that you signed your documents wrong. And they always hand you a black pen, don't they? But you always don't take it red and write all of that out. Yes. Oh my goodness, Justice Yezreel, you better say that. He says that's why bookstores always try to get you to apply for a discount card. That means where they don't have to count you as a sovereign creditor. Discount means you don't count. You're not sovereign. They take the sovereign authority. It's a delegation of authority. Any of those cards that you fill out stuff for. If you do it with the corpses, now this is going to be, interesting over the next few days and weeks and months. Because what would happen if you did that by affidavit in red and all lowercase letters? What would happen? Yes. See, that's what I'm saying. You can't hypothecate someone's affidavit. And an unrebutted affidavit stands as law. You can't hypothecate someone's affidavit. Why? Because it's not your form. That's why we don't fill out their form. A discount card. Really? Are they giving you a discount, or are they doing what these banks did? Taking that capital and creating more stuff with it. For them, more debt with them. And then there they go. They got a new house, quote unquote, and a new car, quote unquote. And what do you have? 10% off of a $30 book. And you still got to pay for the book with PI. What are you getting for your sovereign autograph? What are you getting for that? Better think about that. I sure have, and I'm thinking to myself, not now other one will use my credit or my consent. I'm using it. I don't care what's going on, I'm using it. No one else is using it, I'm using it. So now, let me find ways to do that. Oh, we got to create ways to use it? Okay, we'll do that too. That's what we're doing, creating ways to use our own credit. That's what the Moroccan American Exchange is. We're creating our own wealth. That's why it's called wealth creation. That's why. And this month is that on high because of Mercury and Venus. Those two mean money and commerce. Those banks were making out like bandits with us. And they couldn't start it unless they had capital. They can't do anything without capital. They can't even exist themselves individually without capital, without us. period. So the whole banking structure, the corporate banking structure was based on the heirs. And how many of us consented to black, black, and more black in capital letters? Black. Yes, they are the bandits robbing the real banks because we didn't really know. We didn't know. We didn't remember. Hiram Abiff had been hit his head and laid in a shallow grave for a while. But it's a wrap now. We know. So now we have to create our own everything, and it's already done. The infrastructure's there. We've already created our own everything. We just have to now use it. And it's going to be awesome to look around and see, okay, how can we use this? How can we use that? How can we use this to grow our empire? There it is. It's that simple. It's that simple. They had to have at least, and again, this thing says 100. It says 100 in capital, but I don't even believe it was that much for some of these little banks, these corporate banks that were doing business in a dead status. And then this is interesting. We started seeing these ones doing business as Asians starting their own little small town bank. And I'm thinking, you know, I started thinking about that yesterday and today, like, okay, well, where did they get the capital from? They got the capital from us too. Except the reason the bank was so small is because they weren't going to the quote unquote Federal Reserve. In those cases, the majority of them had sleeping Moors who married into the family, quote unquote. Yes. And they would just have you signing for stuff. Meghan Markle. Oh. Signing in and just see, they can't even get a domicile, a house, without somebody somewhere of us signing something. And these banks were the main way by which they would get the houses. They got houses because they joined a bank that had capital. Heirs who agreed to black status and black ink and capital letters. That's what capital is. And what are the heirs getting? A good old hard time. And, you know, to me, it's just, now that I can see it, and that's the only reason I'm chuckling, because I'm like, really? This is what was going on? Yes, that's what was going on. You mean to tell me all of this time, my mother and my father struggled, you know, at times they were. And they were sitting up there with 9 heirs from one Stargate. They had trillions and trillions and trillions in assets. Yet they struggled. My uncle had 18 heirs. 18 from one heiress who did not know. None of us knew. None of us knew. And the reason why there was an effort to kind of like curb the amount of heirs that were coming is because there's only a certain number of us or a certain number of them that can exist if there's a certain number of us. This is not willy-nilly. Everyone is accounted for in nature and in the universe. And that's why you see their numbers severely lower. Because they were using a status, and if they do not have an in propria persona sui juris status, then any sovereign delegation of authority that they were using, it has to go away, which means that they can't be here. They actually have to go away for the number of heirs that wake up. And that's another reason why this process is our ancestors made it so that the process is in stages and phases, so that it wouldn't be so abrupt, but that the changes could happen, you know, with a flow. It has to be a flow. Wow. Your grandparents had 10 heirs in the North Carolina and were North Carolina territory sharecroppers. Yes. And that's another reason why, you know, when one of the matriarchs says she's expecting a baby, that the party happens. It's on and party with us. It's like we're wealthier now than we were 5 minutes before you said that. 5 minutes before your big announcement that you're pregnant. That's why pregnancy is such a huge deal with us. We love it. Like, yes, have as many heirs as you can. Have as many heirs as you can have. So, you know, that's all I wanted to put forth today with regard to the banking situation. I'll say just a couple more things that that the only reason that the depositors were doing anything or had any value is because of the capital, that the cash reserves that they would come in and use to start other corporations, to get us to sign other contracts. And now that we're awake and we know what's going on and we're starting our own, we have our own bank, we have our own everything. Now, I'll tell you the correlation from a different perspective on how all of this happened. The reason that we consented to that is so that when we did wake up, we would be sharper and more cognizant and more intelligent and more resourceful and all of that, and know what to look for. Because again, the structures that are here belong to us, but we must be competent to claim and use them. And our ancestors were not going to give us, you know, the ability to, well, they were not going to show us that we had the ability already to know how to use all of this until we showed them the willingness to know how to use it. Well, we know about the Swiss system. We know what it is. That's why we built our own. And we didn't have to build it. We just activated it. And our own banking and our own exchange and the whole nine. The whole nine. I like that phrase, the whole nine. Because the nine is the whole. And that's why we're able to do all the things that we're doing right now. Inheriting the companies and the resources of those companies. Because we know how to do so competently, and we're creating wealth for ourselves and for generations and generations and generations into perpetuity. Having said that, if you have not gotten your packets, please email thegovernment@gmail.com, and government has an E on the end of it, so it's THEGOVERNMENTE@gmail.com, and just put inheritance packet and put please send an inheritance packet, and we'll email it to you. And then get it back as soon as possible so that we can continue building the wealth that we're building. We're very excited about it, and clearly the heirs are very excited about it as well. So our requests have just gone through the roof. I love that because it shows that we hear one another and that we see what we have to do as a nation and that we're getting it done. I love that. So with that being said, are there any other questions, comments, wisdom that you want to share at all, or anything, announcements, etc.?
I'd like to, this is Yakub Ali here. Yes. I'd like to look at the word liabilities. If we, since we are not having a negative accounting system, then the word liabilities will need to be changed. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And I'm glad you brought that up. Guess what liabilities are for the heirs? It's the ability to lie. It's the ability to lie and say that we're a black corpse in all capital letters. That's where liabilities come from. Is we're lying about who we are.
A liability.
Yes. That's what liabilities are. The ability of the heirs to lie and say that we're a name in capital letters and black ink. That's a lie. We're not that. So that's where the word, see, they're telling us right there in plain sight, just right in our faces.
Okay, and assets. When we grant loans, that from the bank's perspective, that is wealth that is leaving the institution to be granted to whomever.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it
Yes.
may not be considered an asset. The loan will not be considered an asset anymore, right?
It will be an asset because the definition of loan is a gift from a sovereign. And then you don't give a loan out to someone who's not going to use it to enlarge the empire. It's like the story of the talents in the bibliotext. You give it out and they go out and multiply it. So it's still not a liability because they're going to multiply it and they're going to bring back into the storehouse that which they've multiplied. When you give the heirs something, and this is we're proving that right now. When we're given something and we know who we are, it's going to, whatever you gave us is going to multiply, it's going to grow. We proved that in our sleep. Somebody handed us some debt, and guess what happened? Debt exploded all over the place. Because we consented to it. Well, now we consent to wealth and credit and creditors. because we're the creditors. And when I say credit again, we don't spell it like they did. We're not asking anybody for anything. It's sovereign credit, which means it's a plus for all of us. We don't need credit from someone. No one grants us that. Each and every one of us is the creditor. So now guess what happens? Wealth and credit, gold back, sovereign, everything. It's like the Midas touch. Everything we touch is turning to gold. Everything. So now that's is exploding all over the land. Now you see the state, the ones that are calling themselves the republic. You see them saying that gold is legal tender. Legal tender. Why? Because the heirs have put their hands on something and said, okay, be. And whenever we say be, it is. In Turkish, we say, Oldin ma olduran yönelik imanga dolduran. And that means when we intend a thing, our command is be, and it is. Period. That's how we, that's what we do. And Empress Portia, yes, we rolled the wheels off that lie. That was a lie. It was a lie. Black ink in capital letters is a lie. That's capitalism. Corpse capitalism. Now, something different happens when capital letters are put in red by the sovereign heirs. We're looking at that because we know that property, like we have a lot of sovereign living property. And we're looking at how that works. Our main goal when talking about capitalism and black ink and all of that is to just completely stop all of that joinder with the dead. That stuff, that necromancy has to stop. That had to stop. It had to. We had to disconnect from the dead. Now we can do things and just kind of take our time and take a look at things from a sovereign perspective and from a living perspective and see how we want to do it. Because it's a whole different thing when you're letting something happen to you versus when you're making something happen for you. And that's where we are. We're making things happen for us. We're not letting things happen to us. Liability. That's the best smushing together of words I've seen the hybrids do. Because the hybrids, any words you look at, they have smushed some words together and some prefixes and some suffixes and a root word. They smush it together and change the meaning. And we have to do etymology is really just taking it apart. Etymology is doing the surgery on the word. Take it apart, find out what's going on with it, and then fix it. Etymology is word surgery. I love etymology. And definition is really definition. That's really what it means. The Phoenician, finish, and find, all of those things have to do with the Phoenician. Definition is definition, putting meaning to a word. And yes, we can pull a word out of the clear blue consciousness and coin it and give it meaning. The same way that Facebook did with texting and all of that stuff, where they automatically said that OMG means oh my God. Really?
How does truthability sound?
You know what? That sounds great. That sounds great. Truthability. Sounds great. I like superability. I like truthability. I like sovereign ability. I mean, it could be anything. We got time to think of words, or we can just call it an asset with an E on the end. More ability, all right, of course, I like that too. More ability. All we have to do, that's why our prophet said, if I can just get you to think, you'll free yourself. I love it. With that being said, are there any other comments? Thank you for that wisdom, nobility. Any other comments, questions, wisdom, etc.? Okay. With that being said, peace and grand rising to the sovereign divine.
Peace and grand rising.
Peace and grand rising. Peace and grand rising.
Peace and grand rising.
Peace and grand rising.
Thank you.